the world's fastest rising currency, has turned Tokyo into a capital of glamour and glitz and the $35 box of strawberries. The rock-hard Japanese yen, new driving force in the world economy, at the dawn of a new era. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting tonight from Tokyo. Good evening. I'm standing on the floor of the brand new Tokyo Stock Exchange. Just about a half hour from now, as Americans are settling in for an evening at home, this huge, beautiful space will be teeming with Japanese traders dealing securities worth more than $3 trillion. This is now the world's largest stock exchange, surpassing the New York Stock Exchange. But it is still true, very true, that if America even sneezes, the Japanese catch cold. It is Thursday morning in Japan, and they are waking up to economic news from the United States that could jolt this market as it already has Wall Street. For the first month of 1989, U.S. consumer prices took their biggest jump in 2 years, underscoring fears of a new round of inflation and a new spiral up in interest rates. Business correspondent Ray Brady has the New York end of the story.
Here on the New York Stock Exchange, investors weren't at all happy with today's inflation figures. The jump in prices was far more than anyone had expected, and that sent stock prices tumbling. The Dow Jones Industrial Average falling more than 42 points in active trading. For Americans, the cost of living rose last month 0.6%. That ends 2 years of moderate inflation, because today's increase works out to an annual inflation rate of 7.2%. A figure that was called disturbing today by Federal Reserve Board Chairman Alan Greenspan in testimony before the House Banking Committee.
Let me stress that the current rate of inflation, let alone an increase, is not acceptable, and our policies are designed to reduce inflation in coming years.
In today's figures, there were big increases in the price of gasoline. Food also rose, especially poultry and fish, along with the price of tobacco.
The business expansion is in awfully good shape, perhaps too good for our own long-term good, and a little cooling now can avoid a lot of trouble later.
That puts Alan Greenspan in a bind. He can slow up the economy and cool inflation by raising interest rates. For President Bush, a combination of inflation and higher interest rates could mean that he will return home from Japan to even greater economic problems. Ray Brady, CBS News, New York.
Big message of the day, how interdependent the U.S. and Japanese economies are, how intertwined their future is with ours. Tadashi Yamamoto, who is an expert in U.S.-Japanese relations and well-known in the upper circles of Japanese government, thank you for being with us. We said that when America sneezes, the Japanese catch cold. Any argument with that?
We used to say that we catch pneumonia, but nevertheless we catch a very severe cold even now.
So when there's bad economic news from Washington and New York, what is the effect here?
Well, that would cause a great deal of concern on our part, leaders as well as public, because we know that the economy will be deeply affected given the interdependent nature of our economies.
To mix our metaphors here, if there's a big economic earthquake, a deep recession in the United States, would it be an earthquake here or just tremors?
Certainly, big earthquake.
Big earthquake here as well. What about the future? You're heavily invested in the U.S.
Well, we will perhaps continue to invest because still we believe in the strength of the U.S. economy.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Tonight, a new poll by CBS News, the New York Times, and the Tokyo Broadcasting System shows the closeness of the ties between these two economic superpowers and the dangers that threaten those ties. 7 out of 10 people in both countries say they have generally friendly feelings toward the other country. Yet, while the Japanese people overwhelmingly say U.S.-Japanese trade is a good thing, Americans are not so sure. 40% of Americans said trade with Japan is bad for the U.S. economy, while 34% say it is good. There is distrust on the other side as well. If Japan were attacked, would the United States help defend it? The vast majority of Americans say yes, but the Japanese don't feel at all secure about that. 46% said the U.S. would not help. Now, we'll be back with more news in a moment, and later we'll continue our coverage of funeral preparations for Emperor Hirohito. Americans, Japanese, and the dawn of a new era. Simple to bring you up to date on the day's other news. In Washington, an important U.S. Supreme Court decision about the limits of state responsibility for prevention of child abuse. CBS News law correspondent Rita Braver reports on the case of a battered little boy and the help that came too late.
Joshua DeShaney was repeatedly bruised and bloodied by his own father after he won custody of the child in a divorce. Social workers in Winnebago County, Wisconsin, knew of Joshua's plight, but they did nothing until March of 1984 when Randy DeShaney beat his 5-year-old son so severely the boy's brain hemorrhaged and he became permanently, profoundly retarded. DeShaney was tried and convicted, but the boy's mother sued the county and local authorities. She claimed they'd violated Joshua's liberty under the Constitution by failing to remove him from his father. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected that argument. Chief Justice William Rehnquist explained that the Constitution was designed to protect the people from the state, not to ensure that the state protected them from each other.
We have not come to a place where the federal Constitution has been interpreted to impose duties on the government to protect people from private problems of whatever type.
Child protection advocates had hoped that after the beating death of Lisa Steinberg and other high-profile cases, the Supreme Court would have mandated more protection for abused children.
It puts, I think, the whole community in a terrible bind. Who will protect the children?
And in an emotional dissent, Justice Harry Blackmun wrote, "Poor Joshua," and called the majority decision a sad commentary upon American life and constitutional principles. Rita Braver, CBS News, Washington.
In the U.S. Senate tonight, more trouble for the John Tower nomination. Bob Schieffer has the latest.
After a closed 3-hour meeting of the Armed Services Committee, Chairman Sam Nunn said he does not agree with the president that the latest FBI report clears Tower of all the allegations that have been lodged against him.
I did not agree with the president's assessment of this latest segment of the FBI report. The president is entitled to his view, but I think most people reading that will not come to that same conclusion.
In my judgment, there could be reasonable and honest, credible differences of opinion with respect to some facts.
The nomination has apparently hit another snag. Nunn remains concerned about whether Tower has a drinking problem. He'd planned for the committee to vote on the nomination tomorrow, but now he says that won't happen until the White House hands over more information the committee has been trying to get about Tower. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
In the Middle East, not your typical diplomatic dance today in Cairo, Egypt. This one featured 2 longtime players and a superpower looking for new ground to break. Terrence Smith was there.
It was a rare moment in the annals of Middle East diplomacy. The PLO's Yasser Arafat and Israel's Foreign Minister Moshe Aarons meeting on the same day in the same room, but not at the same time, with the same man, and a Soviet at that. Foreign Minister Edward Shevardnadze had invited both men to Cairo as part of Moscow's high-profile effort to become a major broker in the Middle East. Diplomatic turf previously reserved for the U.S.
The Soviet proposal to convene a full-scale Middle East peace conference under UN auspices within 6 to 9 months. The Russians say the party should include Israel and the PLO.
But Aarons, after a nearly 3-hour session with Shevardnadze this morning, seemed to reject that idea.
The Israeli position is that there should not be contacts with the PLO, that cannot be conducive to the peace process at all.
And Aarons dismissed the significance of his twin billing with Arafat.
I'm not sharing the stage with anybody.
The other actor on that stage emerged this evening after more than 3 hours with Shevardnadze and repeated that the PLO was ready to go to an international conference immediately. In the Middle East, the symbolism of today's back-to-back meetings may have been as important as the substance discussed. But for the Bush administration, which has yet to formulate a Middle East policy of its own, it was dramatic evidence that the Soviet Union is competing for equal influence in the region. Terrence Smith, CBS News, Cairo.
2 major bookstore chains, B. Dalton's and Barnes & Noble, reversed themselves tonight and said they will sell Salman Rushdie's novel, The Satanic Verses. Earlier, hundreds demonstrated outside Iran's UN mission in New York, protesting death threats against Rushdie. And Norman Mailer and other prominent American writers held a public reading from the controversial novel. Coming up next, Charles Kuralt and I will be outside in one of Tokyo's more interesting scenes, so stay here with us. of commercial real estate anywhere in the world.
Yes, if you want to open a little 30-foot by 30-foot shop along here, the rent will come to $585,000 a month.
Well, this same street, 45 years ago, right after World War II, was nothing but a cheap bazaar where people made a few yen selling sandals and trinkets and used clothes from outdoor stalls. The great Wako department store was near financial ruin. The world-famous Mitsukoshi department store was a bombed-out shell.
And today there is Wako on the corner, bright and shiny and prosperous, and Mitsukoshi across the street doing very well, thank you.
And so this street has become a rags-to-riches parable of Japanese success. Susan Spencer has a report on how the Japanese did it and what it has done to them.
The sun sets over Tokyo's Yukima neighborhood, a fact completely ignored in the small factories and shops where the workday goes well into the night. Work 6 days, often 60 hours a week, no complaints. Witness the no-nonsense post-war diligence that transformed Japan from ruins to world economic colossus, the product of national sacrifice and plain hard work. The problem now, the Japanese can't stop working. Or can they? They may be toiling in Yukima, but downtown they're concentrating on having fun. Boy, are they concentrating. And they swear they're having fun. Fun or not, this is exactly the kind of thing the Japanese government wants more people to do. If only they knew how.
They don't know how to play.
Why not?
That's the society has been, I guess. Work.
And a new government bureaucracy is working very hard to change that. Among its achievements so far, a satirical cartoon that leaves little doubt about the dangers of all work and no play. The movie shows the harried boss drinking, a lot. A familiar scene in a country where alcohol is the accepted way to unwind. But alcoholism is rising, as is domestic violence, as are concerns about the stability of the Japanese family. As if all that wasn't reason enough to try to relax, the international community is pressuring Japan to gear down its hyper-efficient export machine, cut the trade surplus, spend more at home.
Japanese are very much nervous about what foreigners say to Japanese. Foreigners are asking Japanese, aren't you spending too long time working? And so Japanese feel maybe that's true.
Especially younger Japanese who wonder what's it for anyway. Most will never have the millions it takes for a house. They spend weeks of their lives commuting from tiny apartments. It's hard to feel like an economic success story. With the government saying that the only way to improve things is to stop working so hard, it's no surprise that efforts to help people slow down are speeding up. Package tours are booming. This one spent 6 hours in traffic to get to a strawberry farm. 20 minutes there, all you can eat, and hit the road again. Or there's Tokyo's new amazing maze. Ignore the scrap heap next door and enter miles of puzzling plywood. This is, of course, a competition. But there also are a few signs of real relaxing. An occasional jogger, businessmen working out at noon. And some Japanese companies have cut hours. Mitsubishi even introduced flex time, a big hit with workers. If change is coming, the timing may be perfect.
Many people think that this is the beginning of a new era. The demise of the emperor really can change the attitude of people.
So everybody, slow down, relax, enjoy the family, all to the tune of the government's new twin holiday song. If it all seems a bit forced, remember, never underestimate the Japanese. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Tokyo.
It does seem a bit forced, doesn't it? And, of course, recreation in Japan can be pretty expensive, too, like everything else.
Well, that you got to believe, Charles. For example, let's say you're an overworked businessman, and you decide to take up the game of golf. A membership at this country club goes for about $750,000, and that's considered a bargain. The most expensive club charges $2.5 million. When we come back, Bob Simon will have a look at Japan's newest competitive sport, shopping. Charles and I are back out on the Ginza now, marveling at all this affluence.
If you don't think the world has changed, Dan, in the years right after the war, that big blue department store back there was the U.S. Army PX.
Well, and if you don't think prices have changed, check out the Waco department store's windows. Fine ladies' handbags, purses, imported from Italy. The cheapest is $500, and they have a lot of them for $5,000.
Well, the Japanese have a lot of money in the bank these days, and the rest of the world would like them to take it out of the bank, start spending it. Bob Simon tells us, Dan, that the Japanese are trying to oblige.
The kimono is being passed on to a new generation. Tradition is alive in this nation of toil. But like the kabuki actor, who's also a quick change artist, the Japanese are transforming themselves from savers to spenders. An American theme song for an American lifestyle. Madonna, the material girl, sold out in Tokyo. They're imitating us again, the Japanese. First they outsold us, now they're outbuying us.
My plastic card is melted.
That imperial white horse which made the world tremble is in a department store now. It cantered all the way from conquest to consumption.
It's the new national goal ordained by the government to reduce the trade surplus. It's been taken up by the people with the same furious energy they've invested in everything else this century. They went to war, they went to work, now they've gone shopping for Japan.
Gold? Gold bars, of course. But how about a gold bonsai tree or sushi wrapped in gold, 40 bucks a bite, for good health, good luck, good profits for the chef. Gold business cards, $60 a piece. Remember that name. And in the country imbued with balance and harmony and understatement, there are now gold-plated French sinks for $11,000 and television sets which can be watched standing up or sitting down in the front seat of a new Toyota, remote-controlled and more.
This screen will tell you where you are, how much you traveled, and where's the next exit.
Since an old-fashioned wedding costs only $60,000, couples are finding ways to spend several times that, from rice to dry ice. Why settle for a priest when you can rent a robot? On coming out day, 20-year-olds buy kimonos for $8,000 just for the day. Many girls are renting them now and using the rest of the money for a vacation, often to America, that great shopping mall across the waters. When you're spending yen, the whole world is the third world. They've invaded California, having turned their swords into bank shares.
We are no more in a position to have to catch up with the West. That phase is now over. We are on the forefront of the race.
Restaurants here will whip up a little something for $500 a person, service included. Dessert, a $120 melon or a cake baked with gold and diamonds. A new affirmation of existence. I spend, therefore I am. Juzo Itami, one of Japan's top movie directors, says he's trying to show his countrymen that they've gone mad.
All I can do is just sort of hold up a mirror to the Japanese people and they show how they are, right now.
Japanese men are looking in their own mirrors more these days, going in for facials and makeup, from self-effacement to Nipponese narcissism, a new kind of martial art.
People tend to become more self-centered, more self-centered.
At Tiffany's in Tokyo, you can feel the frenzy of a fish market on Friday. Maybe it's the name. Big names are boffo here. Japanese always wanted to join the Western elite, one economist said. Brand names are the ticket. Bags by Vuitton, sunflowers by Van Gogh.
This Japanese sort of taste for those big brand names is excessive.
Itami says it's all an attempt to communicate that this island nation with its strange and difficult tongue has finally found a language the rest of the world understands, and its color is green.
It's some sort of international language, isn't it? Something in common.
And this is how Japan is reaching out to the rest of the world, through money.
Yeah. It's very sad, but I think it's true.
The sadness of success. The elders worry that many Japanese have forgotten the meaning of life. The youngers counter that they may be discovering it after all. Bob Simon, CBS News, Tokyo.
A reminder of how intertwined our future is with theirs. Tomorrow, there'll be a big reminder of how intertwined our past has been with theirs. Emperor Hirohito, symbol of all Japan has been for 6 world-shaking decades, will be buried tomorrow. We will cover that extraordinary event live on tomorrow night's CBS Evening News and on the CBS broadcast 48 hours. For now, that's tonight's CBS Evening News. Dan Rather with Charles Carrault reporting from Tokyo. Good night.
Richard Mulligan, grape nuts?
I need my nutrition.
Well, you'll need 4 boxes to equal the vitamin and mineral nutrition in just 1 box of total.
You're kidding.
No kidding.
Ah, shredded wheat.
Get serious, Richard. 12 boxes.
What do you eat all this with? A shovel?
Total.
While events in Japan command attention, CBS News is there with the most resources, unprecedented coverage, unparalleled commitment. CBS News.
This is CBS.
I felt like a complete failure.